Hey there, welcome to Bradford Stringed Instruments YouTube channel again. This is going to be the first in a series of looking at the electrical components in your guitar, the electrical circuits, seeing what they do and how they react together to give you your sound. The first thing we're going to look at is probably one of the most popular, choosing capacitors. First thing I want to let you know is capacitor does not control your sound. It doesn't change your sound. It simply trims the high frequencies off of it, which is actually what's giving you your tone. That's what your tone knob does for you. When we look at capacitors, we look at capacitance, and it is in microfarads. Looks kind of like a backwards U with an italicized F behind it. We're going to talk about what that value and changing that value does to your sound, actually your tone. And then we're going to talk about these little items right here, which are what you're going to be looking at when you're looking at purchasing a capacitor. Let's start out by saying this is the waveform you're getting out of your guitar. Something like this would be uh, raw waveform, nothing on it. Let's say you're running a 0.015 microfarad capacitor. You're not really liking it a whole lot. You've got a lot of highs in here, and the lows are really wide, really big in between them. And it just sounds like a hammer's pinging. It sounds tinny. It's beyond crisp. You're talking to your friend and he tells you that he puts a 047 in his and it always sounds great. And so you decide to give that a try. What's that going to do for you? Well, you're going from a 0.015 to a larger 0.047. That's kind of like putting a hole in a garden hose, and the smaller hole takes away less water, so you still get more water at the end of your hose. But if you make that hole bigger, you're going to get less water at the end of the hose because you're bleeding it out. The way this happens is this 047 capacitor right here, instead of cutting the frequencies off up here where it was, now it's cutting this frequency off down here. And it's removing it and sending it to ground where you're never ever going to hear this again. What you're going to end up with is a waveform like this. Everything from here up is removed. And when you do that, you're not only removing the highs, the voltages, you're also taking some of this area away from in between the highs. So you have less room in between them. Let's say this is how much time you have between highs with the 0.015 capacitor. With the 0.047, you've reduced this time in between. There's a big difference between these two. When you hear that and you're listening to it, especially since you've cut this waveform off so low, what you're going to end up with is something like this right here. And your ears are going to hear these high spots. That's mostly what your ears are going to comprehend. But since there's nothing in between the high spots now, because you've also removed it, it ends up sounding like a long hum, a low hum, no mids, no highs. It sounds horrible. When you're choosing your capacitor, what you're looking at is trying to get the most out of that tone knob position. You only have so much room on your potentiometer, say from here to here, and you have to shift it back and forth in order to get what you want out of it. You can change potentiometer. We're going to talk about that when we talk about tone circuits, and that will give you a broader spectrum. But for right now, let's say we have a 0.015 microfarad capacitor, and we like our highs, and they sound good. That's taking and leaving, because it's a smaller capacitor, it's leaving more highs in the circuit, letting more highs through. Well, you only have so much circuit down here, so you're going to lose some lows, but you don't care because you like your highs. If you don't like your highs, then you're going to want to go with a larger capacitor. What's that going to do? It's going to take these highs right here, and it's going to throw them away. And what it's going to leave you with is your mids and your lows. But you still have a good potentiometer. Everything from from 0 to 1 you hear a difference, from 1 to 2 you hear a difference, all the way up from 9 to 10. Very responsive. Something like this, middle of the road, is what I try to do when I do a guitar for resale. I make sure that this tone knob is very responsive in all these positions. You have some highs, you have some lows, you have a little bit of everything, so that you as a customer can hear the sound, and then you can start tuning these capacitors to get what you want, exactly what you want out of it. This is right here is what guitar manufacturers do when they build a guitar for sale. You can put too much of a capacitor in. Right here, this is like a tiny, it might as well not even be a capacitor in it. When that happens, you're shifting this potentiometer spectrum so far that the top half of the knob, from positions 8 to about 10, you're not going to hear any change. You're only going to get so many highs out of it, and then that's it. The rest of it is just repeating what's already there. But by doing that, you've lost some of your mids and all of your lows. Vice versa, if you have a capacitor that's too big, you're going to take out some of your mids and all of your highs. And all you're going to gain is half of a potentiometer, half a tone knob that doesn't do anything except a low hum that you don't like anyways. Well, most people don't like. So if you've ever picked up a guitar and you have to turn the capacitor more than halfway before the sound even changes, this is what you got going on. Changing the capacitor will definitely fix that. The other part about choosing capacitors that we're going to cover are these right here. What you're going to see when you're purchasing, when you're looking at purchasing one online. Tolerance is in percent. That's the percent that capacitor can be off from its rated capacitance before the manufacturer throws it out. Most guitars that you purchase are going to have 5% or less. Generally, the lower the percentage, the higher the price. If you get a capacitor, say from Sprague, a lot of times theirs are going to be 2%, and they're going to be priced because 2% is very low tolerance. When you buy a 022, you're going to get a 022 or a 021 or 023. It's going to be very tight tolerance. Whereas if you had, say, a 50% tolerance on a 022, well, you could have a 0.011 or a 0.033. You don't know. So tolerance is generally, I keep it within 10% when I'm looking at getting something just to test, just to see which way I want to go with it. The next thing you're going to see is a voltage rating. They really shouldn't even bother putting this on capacitor ads for guitars. The voltage makes absolutely no difference in a guitar. as long as it holds enough voltage to not burn up. Most guitars are going to run between half a volt and 1 volt. If you got humbuckers and big gauge strings and you got everything just tweaked as hard as you can tweak it, trying to get all the voltage you can get, you may get 1.5 volts. So anything over 5 volts is definitely going to be more than enough voltage for you. The next thing is time constant. And that's something you don't hear a whole lot about, but at the same time, you hear about it all the time. This time constant right here is what most people mistake an older capacitor mellowing for. Capacitors do not mellow with age. That is an old wives' tale. There's nothing in a capacitor to mellow. There are two plates between dielectric material encapsulated in paper or mylar or ceramic or some, they're encased in something to keep the air out of them. In theory, a capacitor will work at 100% of its rating until either one or two things happens. Either it gets too much voltage and you burn it up, or whatever it's encapsulated in leaks air into it. In both cases, it will not work. So there's no such thing as mellowing. What the time constant does do is mellow your sound. And so they are actually correct when they're talking about the older capacitors are more mellow. But they didn't mellow with age. Let's say we have a new ceramic capacitor with a fast time constant. What this is going to do for us is that capacitor is going to charge up very quickly, and then it's going to hold that trim voltage almost exact, and then it's going to discharge very quickly. That's going to be a very fast, very quick capacitor. You're not really going to be able to, it's kind of like running a compression pedal. You don't realize it's on until you cut it off. But for you guys that are doing all this metal thrashing and you're down on the 12th and the 14th fret and you're hitting 8 notes a second, this is definitely right here. This is what you're going to want, because that's going to allow you to hear every single note. You're going to need that speed in order to get that to sound right when you play it. On the other hand, the old capacitors with the slow time constant, because they didn't need to be fast back then. They were pushing tube amps, tube television, transistor radios. Even if they had the technology to do it, there's no need to. What the slow time constant is going to do for you is it's going to take longer for that capacitor to charge, and then it's going to peak out, and then it's going to take a long time to discharge. And that curve right there to your ears is more fluent, more melodic, a little bit more harmonic, just a smoother, more mellow tone. That's how you're going to get it. You're going to get it with a slow time constant. This is going to be for you jazz guys or maybe country. Definitely like a backup guitar. The types of capacitors are really going to control your time constant more than anything else. Ceramic capacitors are generally the least expensive, and they have the fastest time constants. Remember, capacitors aren't really made for guitars. Capacitors are made for electronic circuits, and the ceramic capacitors is what they've really gone to in the modern times. So they're going to be easy to get. They're going to be less expensive because they're so easy to get, and they're going to be the fastest time constants. The next would be your Mylar. These are just good old tried and true, been in guitars since the 50s, 60s. These are basically what they used to run in the tube amps, and that's when they started playing with capacitors and changing them in guitars with tube amp capacitors. They were generally Mylar. That's like your old orange drop capacitors. chocolate drops, things like that. They're not very expensive. Um, and the time constant is a good middle of the road, just playing the guitar around the house, practicing, having a good time. Definitely a good capacitor. Nothing wrong with them. The paper and oil is what a lot of people will go to when they want to mellow their guitar out because it has the slowest time constant. Another thing with the paper and oil is they're generally the ones you see made to original spec when you're looking at purchasing a capacitor. What that's saying is they're manufacturing a new paper and oil capacitor, but when they manufacture it in such a way that the time constant is the same as it was back in the 50s and the 60s. So what you're going to end up with is a super mellow capacitor that sounds like it's something expensive, but it's not. I know I was running a true original new old stock 022 Bumblebee, paid over $50 for it. And just to see if there was a difference, I put a new made to original spec paper and oil Sprague 022 in it, and I could not tell the difference. So that's definitely a good route to take if you want a mellow guitar. So here you go. Hopefully we've got you kind of versed on capacitors and how you're going to choose them. I've done this chart right here to try to, you got to have a starting point. Your starting point is what you have in your guitar now. If you have an 033 and you want more high tones, then go higher on the list. And then you're going to start looking at these capacitances. But if you have that same 033 and it's still too high pitched for you, you're getting too many highs, you want to mellow it out and get lower with your tone, then you want to go lower on the list. And you're going to start looking at these capacitances. Definitely pay attention to these when it comes to things like your time constant. You don't have to worry about voltage, and the tolerance percentage is just how close is it to the advertised capacitance. If you're getting at half price and for 10% tolerance, that's a pretty good deal. It's going to be pretty close. You're not going to hear a difference on the tolerance. I hope this helps you. I'm going to put all these slides on our webpage. Facebook page. Just go to our YouTube homepage and click on the Facebook link. Definitely email me if you have any questions. Email address is at the beginning and the end of every video we do. I hope everyone's having a good day and continue to have good days until I see you next time.